Les Spencer, it's been really awesome to meet you. I remember when we met around a fireplace. We've shared a number of other conversations together. One of the things that I'd love to talk to you about today is a book that you've written, which is titled Nurturing Community for Wellness, which is a beautiful title. I mean, this is, in some sense, this is, for me, one of the most important things there is to relate with and really understand. And on the front of it, the front cover has an image of a strange attractor. And I was wondering, what's the relationship between the two of those things for you, and why do they matter to you?
Yes, the word that comes to mind is energy. Like in that picture, there's a real sense of motion and energy in motion. And key aspects of this exploring what sorts of nurturing potency happening within communities that can contribute to wellness. But typically, to use a phrase that we were just talking about before the filming, of emergent phenomena, that the book is actually about the life work of Dr. Neville Yeomans. And within about 30 seconds of meeting him, I thought there's something about the exquisite social ecology of this guy's manner of relating. It was quite extraordinary. You know. His absolute rigour in terms of values. But on the particular occasion, he said, we are going to be learning some processes in engaging with one another that are extraordinarily potent. And so there needs to be the attention to the nature of the energy between us. And like his insistence on that was, I've never come across a guy like this. And there was something, because the other fellow that was there introduced it, but it's within seconds of Neville talking, the whole mood amongst 20 people was one of, we're engaged in something magical. Like to find a mood shift so quickly, because we tend to only notice when there's a bad mood. Right. But there's some commentators that says that a pervasive aspect of being human in the world is mood, and we immediately shift from, as soon as we leave one mood, we shift to another. Right. So that's a bit of a ramble on, but
I'm with you. So there's something about, in this case, a strange attractor as embodied in Neville,
yeah,
which you witnessed as being critical for enabling an atmosphere, a relationship among a gathered group,
yeah,
to come into process with each other for the purpose of what?
Well, this was requiring competences, abilities to engage profoundly in the moment with others.
Right, so it's a kind of teaching for a deep kind of relating and paying attention to what's really present.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that particular membership of that group actually lasted for the next 18 months.
And how old were you?
That was 85, I was 45.
Okay, so that 85, and now?
1985.
Okay, and that would make you now?
82.
82.
83 in a couple of weeks. So that's over 40 years ago.
Right. So we live in a time at the moment, and people always wonder about this. They wonder, has it always been so precarious? Has life, has culture felt always to be so precarious? And at the level of small groups and people living in all manner of places around the world, of course there's been endless stories of precarity and challenge and tragedy and overcoming and all of this in life. And so it sort of depends how far you zoom out with respect to culture, with respect to civilization and the project of this intelligence or not in communication that is human beings at this point in time. I'm wondering from your perspective, because I know that we've shared a lot of resonance and I've understood some of your thinking about this. We both share a view that there is much in society, in culture, that's in desperate need of a certain reconstitution, a recultivation. In some important sense, the way I relate to culture anyway is that which must always replenish itself and reinvigorate itself. And so in that sense, this is par for the course of what it is to be and become and contribute in the context of culture. But I'm wondering from your perspective, how important has recognizing what's lacking in communities today, in the communities you've lived among, I suppose we can begin with those in Australia, but the West more broadly. What have you felt is lacking, and in what way has your work and your life been in relation to responding to that? What's grabbed you and gripped you?
Those two words, connecting and relating. And typically what I find very, very hopeful and very, very positive in my human experience is humans under stress tend to become functional in context. Classic example, our mutual friend up in Kinglake, where the firestorm came in 2008, under extraordinary emotional turmoil. And I have never experienced, even though my travels through disaster areas in Southeast Asia, the amount of emotional, like the amount of heat in the emotions following the fire. And yet there was every day and every evening there were superb examples of coming together, connecting and relating. Now, I've just recently been talking to the governor over of a maximum security prison in Norway, and I was telling him about being present in a maximum security in the UK in 2018, in for an hour and a half with 24 guys that had experienced 8 years of what is called therapeutic community as a mode of living in their section of the prison. 16 of them were serving life sentences, so they were very serious dudes. And what I experienced amongst these guys when they were left, like the staff would say, okay, pick up on that theme of what that incident that happened and the implications of that incident, and off they went. The quality of the connecting, obvious connection between these guys and the relating. I was attending everyone that was talking. I was absorbing and monitoring everybody, including the staff, who were not mentally present in the room. They were looking like this, up with the pixies, thinking about what they're going to do on the weekend. When it was my turn to talk, I said, here's our visiting friend from Australia. What do you make of us? No, they all wanted to know. And I said, I don't know if you guys have got any idea whatsoever about how bloody good you are. The quality of your connecting and relating was through the roof. The pity was the people were not mentally present here, with my reference to the heads of the criminal justice system. the cabinet ministers and their advisors, the heads of government and the heads of business, the Business Council of the UK, they all should have, 24 of them were all crying. All crying. And there was one guy that I was marking out for non-verbals. As soon as it was finished, he came across and said, I've been looking forward to meeting someone like you. I found out later that was the first time that he had spoken in 8 years.
Mm-hmm. And what was your relationship with him? How did you address him?
Lifelong friend. Lifelong friend. As if. And then he said, I've got to introduce you to my friend. And he brings out a little Australian budgie with his friend. So I put my knuckle up like this, and the budgie immediately jumped onto my knuckle, as they'll do. So I go, he said, what? And the birds go back to me. I said, okay, you do that, and then you can talk budgie to your bird. And he's right off the planet. That's marvellous, marvellous. Anyway, when we got back in, after I had engagement with a few of the others, the staff were saying, what just happened? What just happened? They knew that something, but none of them ever listened to anything I said or saw anything that I did. Because...
And that was the supervisors?
Because they are trained to distance the inmates. They're trained to have no relationship. They're trained to treat them as individuals, not as a collective, even though it was a therapeutic community.
And so what do you mean by that? What do you mean by, because on the one hand, to relate with a friend is to develop a relationship that's unique to the two involved, and so in that sense cares deeply for the individuality, we might use the words in that way. So when you mean care for the collective or relate...
Not part of the training.
Right, and what would that mean?
That's trained out of them.
And so what would it mean to care for a collective or relate with a collective?
Well, as an indication, I sat on the left-hand side. I found out who was the most dangerous guy in the room. And I would sit on his left-hand side, near his heart. I wanted to sit near the heart of the most dangerous person there. So after I'd engaged with some of the others in the group as well, and everyone I engaged with immediately started sobbing, and then they had to calm down, and then we could keep going again. He goes into my ribs in a most vicious fashion. He said, shut up, you've talked enough. Okay, that's cool. And he said, right, my turn. Hands up, who wants this guy to come and work here? 24 hands went up. He said, there's some feedback for you. I said, thanks for telling me I like your style. I know where I am with this. Now, see, the basic training coming through the criminal justice system is to be objective, because we want to know objective, verifiable results. But being objective turns the inmates into objects. Their language turns them into nouns. Inmate 33. We're going into a discussion. Any word ending in ION is a noun. They only talk nouns. They don't talk verbs. And so they are thingifying each of those inmates, and every time they engage with them, they're reinforcing you are a thing. It's pervasive, and yet it's hardly noticed unless you've got the ears to listen to the linguistics, the psycholinguistics of what they were doing. Right. Now this is actually weaving in a practical sort of narrative, the key insights in nurturing community for wellness.
Well, before you talk to me about that, for the sake of someone who might be encountering this and is wondering a little bit about your background and some of the life you've lived that's drawn you along on this path. And, both you and I share, on the one hand, a certain skepticism about, let's say, professional and expert, as that has come to associate itself with real relationship. And so, in that sense, from the perspective of real healing and engaging with the existential reality of life, there's something I actually find almost distancing about appealing to how we've been recognized by institutions for some capacity to respond on matters of health and wellness, which isn't to discredit the whole thing whatsoever. It's just a natural resting state I have to be not so interested in someone's credibility in that formal regard, because when it comes to being here and now and in touch with what is and relating with each other, this is the kind of thing that you can feel and relate to at a level of depth that doesn't need to reference some piece of paper to justify itself. And yet, we do live in a society in which an understanding of, and in any society, the lineage and path you've walked along the way to developing that capacity is very important. And so from the perspective, and for the sake of those who are wondering, who is Les Spencer in that regard, could you say some things about what is it like for you to reflect on that, maybe your educational journey, what's been most important for you, but perhaps also weave in a little bit about, I know you've completed a PhD in relation to a lot of this work, for instance, you've worked all around the world. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Courtesy of the times, you go to the university for nothing, no university fees. So I took maximum advantage of that. I started at university in '76 as a mature age student. So I went through and finished a degree in sociology, specialising in the sociology of knowing. My questions a plea for a wider understanding of understanding in the social sciences. What does it mean to understand in some profound sense? What is the difference between knowledge and knowing? Then I went to do behavioural science in psychology. I also went on and did neuropsychobiology and a professional practice here in psychology. And then in all of this, I think the key understanding I took from all of that was that enabled me to find really, really interesting people that I got most of my potent learning, micro skills of working. Because to use an expression out of the Philippines, this way of working is working from a position of contextualising. You're monitoring moment to moment the shift in context. That we are beside and there's a plane going over at the moment. Someone watching over here to make sure that the camera's still working. From a position of the context and being guided by the context as to what. So the context is telling me what to say and what to do. So my key learnings out of all of my years, I had something like 29 years of university work. My PhD took 7 years to do. And that was part-time, full-time. I was working full-time on it. And my PhD, my challenge was in 1998 I started. It was to endeavour to find what made this unit called Fraser House work back from 59 to 68. That's 25 years earlier. And yet no one from that unit, because Neville introduced me, these were outpatients, these were patients, these were people that ran big group, whole of community group with 180 people in it. for psychologists. None of them, including Alf Clark, because I went back and saw him, none of them could tell me what was the magic that created the transforming. No one could tell me. And Neville said, it's your PhD, you work it out. No, I'm not going to tell you. He said, but what was missing in Alf Clark's research? It conveyed nothing of the feel, the lived life knowing of being in Fraser House. And conveying a lived life knowing was totally absent because he was objective. He was saying what and when and where. All stuff that you could, knowledge you can put in a book. But somehow I had to convey the twirling energy. And then later in the book, you see that same twirl suddenly in a spin. Because Neville would take advantages of high stress emotion to do a sudden shift in group energy. Because there is a phenomena in physics, in nature, that systems, chaotic systems under high stress, under massive perturbation, perturbing like stirring, getting stirred, have this extraordinary property to suddenly leap to a higher order of function.
Or they can break down.
Or
right?
they can break down.
And so that brings us to an interesting point. I mean, we're speaking here in a beautiful place, somewhere near where you've lived for a long time. And it's peaceful here, and it's as if everything's set up for us to slow down and contemplate what matters to us and to share in a manner that is hopes and intends to be worthwhile. But I know that, I mean, certainly what's been occupying a lot of my time over the last week and few days is particularly this latest eruption in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And we have here an unbelievably chaotic, high-stress environment. And I'm not going to ask exactly what can be done about that, because there is a certain proximal division between us and that in so many ways. And yet, there seems to be something really interesting to ask you. What have you learned about those high-stress situations? What have you learned about the kind of response that can enable a breakthrough to a higher order way of functioning in some important sense? Well, first of all, how can we think about that? But also, what's the type of behavior that reliably or is more likely to eventuate in a breakdown? And what's the difference between the two?
Yes. Neville introduced to me to a term called peace healing. One word, peace healing. And understanding the original derivation of the word heal is to make whole again. So peace healing is making everyone whole again and woven together. Now, I have had experiences. One classic example, there was two of the people up in Scandinavia that got the head of the Palestinians and the head of the Jew to go up into the mountains at the top of the fjord for a month. Have you heard that?
No, do you know who it was involved in particular?
Arafat was one. I'm not sure who was the Prime Minister when Arafat was there.
Right.
And they ended up becoming absolute buddies with the quiet and the peace of the snow. The challenge was that all of their networks were not up there with them. Right. They came back totally and utterly transformed, but were unable to bring that energy back into the context. Because this is the same as taking from, because I have been involved in working as a psychosocial emotional consultant in business environments. I used to do all the professional training for Australia's institutional investors. They look after about 4 trillion. I used to organise all their training. And the difficulty, if you took 3 or 4 or 6 people away for an encounter, relational team building and what have you, it's all undone as soon as they move back into the old environment. Right. So there has been occasions where there has been groups of Palestinian women and Israeli women getting together and sharing cookings and recipes and preparing food together. Possibly, I've experienced that up in Bali, the Balinese tradition of preparing food as a community. So there is processes, and there is up out of Vanuatu, but also spreading particularly through the Philippines, and a person up there that brought it down into Australian Aborigines is a term called healing artistry, where all manner of aspects of artistry, like dance and movement and rhythm and body percussion, and just tranquil, becoming still and quiet together in a beautiful place. All of these forms of artistry. So, for example, up in Bougainville, there is a tradition of whole village to whole village reconciliation ceremonies. And that they still have, they had 10 years of civil war back around the turn of the century.
Where is this?
In Bougainville. Because of the Banguna mine, that they ended up fighting with the Papua New Guinea soldiers, but then it broke down there. So there was a civil war as well. Now, they're doing, even now, there's a couple of key major, what Neville termed relational mediating. So what is needed is peace healers, people skilled in peace healing going into those contexts, and relational mediating. And there's a whole lot of processes that can be used. The big one up in Bougainville has got this very potent name, the washing away of the blood reconciliation ceremony. And that hasn't happened yet because it requires the presence of every single person involved who's got to be there and have done enough work on themselves to be able to run with the process. So, like, this is now 20 years after those things and they still haven't done that one because it is so powerful. But as you said, it can come together when you have things that are perturbed in this relational mediation, these whole village to whole village reconciliation ceremonies. Imagine this, the time is agreed, and everyone in this aggrieved village is coming down the valley. And as they're coming down the valley, they're going on their drums. They're walking together. The elderly are being carried. The lame are being aided. And all of that, the receiving village, all of them, they got this rhythm going. And the chant is, all we want is peace. All we want is peace. And that is the anchor for everyone to be quiet, to be quiet, to be quiet. So and this was happening in a time before guns. They would all settle with bringing all their food with them, and this village would have all the food with them, so no one had to leave. And they were more than the spears throw away from each other. Then a spokesman for the aggrieved village would say, thank you for receiving us. This is the nature of our grievance. And once he'd finished talking, there was absolute silence until there was a group consensus. We've heard you. You have been heard and we have heard you. Then another person from the agreed village might be the brother of the girl that was supposedly stolen, and so on. And then after all of that, they might break for food. Then it would resume and might go for 2 and 3 days. Ultimately, the girl that's supposed to have been stolen will stand up and say something like, and she's from the agreed village, but she's in the village. She said, I'm very sad. I'm very, very sad. I yearn to be with my sisters. I yearn to be with my cousins. I yearn to be with my family and friends. But I could no longer stand the way you were treating the women. I had to leave. I chose to leave because of the behaviour of the men in my own village, an absolute tragedy. This is sounding absolute silence. That's what puts a new spin on it. So that's the sort of nature of the thing. There's all sorts of competences in schools, and there are people that are very, very tentative, because there's this whole issue of how do you do intercultural peace healing, intercultural and inter-clan, where there's been total breakdown, an absolute atrocity in the awful extreme. I have been in the presence. I've been in the presence of torturers. I've been into torture centres. I've been into places that should not exist on earth. Boy, I can know why people are pissed. I had the guy that exhumed 5,000 human skulls from the killing fields outside of Phnom Penh. And it was the first time in 20 years with me, I just held my hands. He was saying, can you understand this? And I put my hands underneath his and just held the space for him. 5, 10 minutes. For the first release in 20 years. And he said, oh, boy, I need to do that. I need to do that. Thanks. That's really good. But in terms of context, he had about 10 human skulls, and I could see the manner of death. Yeah. So I've worked the edge and know how to be present in extreme context. But most people don't have any experience of this. However, the same potency can work in the simple matter of acknowledging can I acknowledge a child on a bus without having the police called? That's the world we live in. Probably be so heavy I sit when you're talking about how to get totally relaxed.
Yeah, not at all.
Meditative in a lovely spot.
Well, that's why we've come here.
Yeah. No, we can go to lightness and being in the role of humour in peace healing.
Well, it was something I realised I needed to bring a little bit more play to what I'm doing. I used to be quite a playful guy.
Can I tell you a story on playfulness?
Please.
The guy that was the real superb on healing artistry, he went to a camp outside of Alice Springs, and all the children were fly balloon and all the snot running down of them. They had 6-year-olds with still not toilet trained, and put in, were just running down their legs, and the flies were all over them. So he decided to said, okay, you've all had plates. Okay, I'm going to be the rain man. So you've got to, when I squirt you with the hose, you've got to put the plate over your face so you don't get wet. So and then they say, okay, you can play that game. So here they were washing their dishes after eating. Extraordinary. So now they always play the rain man game after every time they have a meal.
Yeah, nice. Well, that reminds me of something. One of the aspects that seems to be core to Neville Yeoman's work was an insistence on, and I'll read this out properly, an insistence on engaging the free energy rather than trying to fix the stuck energy.
Very important concept.
What's important about that lesson? What's important about engaging the free energy rather than trying to fix the stuck energy?
Yeah. I can tell what the story that I was talking before, and that is that the typical response to the militias of the world and nasty is to go into shrink and to shrink and go into defence. You know, typically that's the only option that they have. And if they kept on doing that, they're literally going down and they're literally collapsing around the heart, and they go into co-contraction, which is tensing on the back and front of the arms. Notice that as soon as I do that, I go into spasm. I can't stop doing that. Stop, relax. Now, what tends to happen with the stuck energy is you go into co-contraction and you twist like this, so your diaphragm is twisted. You can't breathe. The best you can do is the sobbing breath. But they don't do that, mate. It's a silent sob. If you intentionally do that, which I do, you feel terrible within about 3 minutes. Then I give myself the challenge of how to get rid of that. So all I have to do is lengthen, take a flow of awareness down out my feet. And I can just get rid of those problematic, all that neurochemicals of emotion, just let them. Because we have it within our nervous system. Not only do we have reuptake blockers, dispersal out through the side of the synapse, but we also have disintegrators. People have heard of dopamine and the catecholamines. The dopamine is long chemical DOPA mixed with the amines. So what we're doing is tapping into the free energy, is we literally disintegrate for a more functional integration, where integration is making whole, is healing. So the free energy is where in the system is there. Like, we have the idea that if you have a rock on the top of a hill, it has potential energy, because all that needs a slight tip, and it'll roll, 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 roll. So that's an example in nature of potential energy. And if it's easy to nudge, you've got free energy. Neville adapted his father's understanding about the flow of water in nature. At the top of the primary valley, all the water S's down. And it all comes to the start of the creek. Now, if you put a dam so it fills to the start of the creek, you've stored water in the highest part that you can store, surface water, but water harvesting. You put a tap and a pipe through the dam wall and you've got a tap. Then you've got free energy of gravity to ship that water all the way through. You link up other dams for overflow, and you position the dam so that you can also have water flowing through channels. And you've got a design system based on free energy. Neville was using free energy in the group all the time in Fraser House. I'll give an example.
First of all, Fraser House seems to be a place that's extremely important to you.
Yeah.
It serves almost like a mythological function in terms of the story of your life and a lot of your learning.
Fraser House was purpose-built along a contour, and half of them, to go into here, half of them were Neville intentionally took out of the back wards of the psychiatric hospitals, and half of them out of Long Bay Jail that they wouldn't give a day of parole to. And I said, why in heaven's name would you set yourself that challenge? He said, think about it. Think about free energy. They've had all of the dominant system socialising knocked out of them. Tabula rasa, blank slates. They were the easiest people to work with, as long as you create parties for them and have it as the most wonderful place in the world to be in. And none of them would want to go back to where they come from.
So these were people who had been in prison but were out of prison, or were these people who were currently in...
He would say, I want a couple of murderers that you wouldn't give at the end of their sentence in 6 months, and you wouldn't give a day of parole to them. Send a couple of those. Highly charged, hyper aroused, high arousal, highly emotional, and no self-control.
So they might have been in prison for 20 years.
30 years.
But they're reaching the last portion, and so there's a possibility of something different. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is about 40 years ago, right? 35 years ago?
It was stopped in 68.
Stopped in 68?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking like 56 years ago, 55,
That's right.
55.
And people going there, after have been going for a while, they, as a condition of going there, the focus was a social connecting and relating as the healing process. And the understanding that they were there because of society's capacity to constitute madness and badness. So they assumed that everything that was going on had a social dimension, and they would have a social healing to reconstitute them. That was the process. And the process was for them to do the healing with their significant others. They had to come 10 times to big group, which would be 180 people. Well, it might be about 174. And you and your family, your crazy mother and your crazy father, and your grandfather still alive, and your crazy mate, they have to come along and agree to come for 10 times with you.
And these were sometimes people who had been affected by tremendously traumatic events perpetrated by the people who were just about to come out of prison. So that's the context we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the people out of the psych hospitals, they also had to have their family and friend agree to come as outpatients and sign on as outpatients. They weren't there as silent observers. They would get the full focus of 180 people on them. After it had been going for about 6 months, they were so good in reconstituting, people were leaving after 3 months, 12 weeks, with a functional family friend network of between 50 and 70 people in regular contact with each other. Extraordinarily successful. And yet today, there is not a trace of that in the New South Wales Health Department's records that it ever existed. And one can ask why. I think it was reasonable that a whole lot of people in drug-based psychiatry did not like this at all.
So, returning to this relationship between free energy and then stuck energy, can you give me an example of how the process took place with this large group of people, perhaps with people individually? I'm sure there were many instances similar to how you were speaking about when you were recently working in Norway, when there was a particular, by the sounds of it, a particular kind of alpha male there who you recognized you really had to be on the lookout for with respect to addressing his functionality in the collective process, but of course still relating to him as an individual, which meant in this case you sat on his left-hand side to be near his heart. And so in that way there's this relationship both between treating someone individually in the context of the collective, and if you had attempted to address that situation in a way that had perhaps maybe too directly challenged a certain nature in presentation of this man, then could that have been an example of an attempt to fix something that was stuck rather than work with what might have been more readily available to come forward? So I know there's probably more explanation there, but in the context of your work with Neville, yeah.
Within Fraser House, if there was any point of high stress, the word went out to gather as many people as possible. Gather as many. So the word came out that Louise is upstairs after the groups, shouldn't be up there with a hubby, and he threatened to kill her. So everyone up there, as many as possible. So Neville rushed up as well. Now Neville normally they wouldn't wait for Neville, but on this occasion they opened so that Neville could get right to the doorway. Now, the guy is standing on the bed, and it was a 4-bed dorm that he was in, but he was standing on his, and he's got this long, deadly psycho knife, and he's stabbing the corner. And he's saying, I'm going to kill her, I'm going to kill her, I'm going to kill her.
Corner of the room? The room.
Now, she's beside him, stroking the back of his thigh, saying, calm down, Prit, calm down, Prit. Now, there's 2 orderlies, and they've got this Novocaine or something that you can just jab and they drop like a rock.
It's a tranquilizer.
Yeah. So they said, do we jab him? Do we jab him? And they're really highly agitated. Now, I'll put you on the spot. What would you do? Neville made one statement that tapped into the free energy.
Well, I think
it's unfair.
It is. To be truthful in response, it would necessitate. It would necessitate being part of the context, wouldn't it?
That's
so
right.
There's really nothing I could possibly say that would be appropriate. It's a matter of being and responding to the reality that is, and it's that sensibility towards the energy.
Well said.
So,
well said. Now this is what Neville said. Jab the wife. Now immediately she turned to him and was absolutely truthful for the first time in their life. You fucking bastard! I'll bite your fucking balls off! And then Neville said, jab the wife now! And she's out like a light. The guy immediately stops, turns the knife sideways, slowly lowers himself down and lays the knife on the bed. And he said, I love this woman. I'm addicted to toxicity. She was up here trying to make me go out and do more Housebergs. See, Neville recognised if he was going to kill the wife, he would kill her. That was the symbolic. But he was having a symbolic utterance. Can someone hear my words that can't be said? Because as soon as I mention it, I'm going to lose her. And I won't have her in my life anymore if I put her weights up. So he was in what Gregory Bateson would call a kinesthetic double bind. He couldn't talk. He couldn't say anything. But Neville heard the words in the symbolic meaning of the knife. And that was the free energy in the... Isn't that extraordinary? Anywhere else in Australia or the world, if they would have jabbed him, it would have masked any of the underlying psychodynamics and nothing would have changed.
Whew. There's so much here that I think it's worth asking you to share some reflection on that story from another angle. If you were to express what you think has taken place here.
I've just revved up myself inside the glory be. I don't feel very good inside having done that role play.
I can understand why you did a real service for us with doing it, because...
Sorry, folks listening to this, I hope you can calm down. You can be with me Take a deep breath in and down to the ground. That's the way I do it.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, maybe I can share some reflections then. I'll give you a chance to settle. One of the core aspects of what we've been trying to build in the voicecraft context, core to the philosophy of the approach, is the recognition that the quality, the integrity of the relational field, the relationships that exist themselves among a group of people in a conversation, matters tremendously to what can actually be held in the space, but also what we can share together. And I relate to sharing as a type of exchange which truly is of the essence of transformation. Partly there's something in the nature of sharing that can always surprise us, because it's a real encounter, it's a real transference of a kind. And we're becoming something other when we enter that process. And so there's something critical about, we can say on the one hand a maturity, we can say a practice, an integrity of relating that is present in a group that can make possible the being with a criticality of emotion, of tension. And so when we think about many polarizing dynamics in the world today, what's been a core effort of mine is to try and build and respond to that in the knowledge that the words themselves aren't enough. Broadcast media itself isn't enough. There's something about the necessity of speaking forth, of communicating together in a context that can actually raise you and support you and encourage you and encare you into that process. And the reason I say this is because as I hear connecting some of the dots, you've stressed the importance of, one, as many people as possible who could be part of a process. Now we're going to run into some certain scale dynamics and what have you. We'll leave that to the side for the time being. But something extremely important about the return and the practice and the quality of all those who must have had to have been present, and they must have shared that quality in such a way to enable Neville, to support Neville into addressing the situation as he did. We need to be able to lean on each other, and this is often one of the things that's so lacking in how many different, whether it's media channels, festival contexts, conferences, who look to bring together panels and speakers, right? A festival of dangerous ideas, I know, is something that is done by the ethics, I think .org.au, quite a large institutionally credible institution, founded and run by a guy who's got good intention. His name's Simon Longstaff. And I said to him once, I said, if you really wanted to have a festival of dangerous ideas, then you would create the conditions in which all who are present are in a mode of deep participation in real relationality and real communication. It's not enough to get a person over here who has one polarized view and another polarized view that have been pre-sanctioned as acceptable enough for our festival of dangerous ideas. And I'm not speaking to this from the perspective of wanting to loose dangerous ideas. At the heart of this, to the degree there's something, I think, ennobling and virtuous about this desire to bring together people to relate with matters of tension, it's what is it and how can we support each other to participate in transformation together, as we allow this plane to just pass us by. But in order to be able to participate in transformation together, for the sake of health, for the sake of growth, for the sake of a realization of potential, we could speak to a number of beautiful things, important things to recognize as involved together. Then it is the effort and intention and quality of participation as distributed among all of those in relationship, that's absolutely central. What happens in the middle, what happens where the focal point is, of course it's important. Of course it has a profound kind of effect. But it's enabled, that's been the proposition of mine, it's enabled and helped to shape itself and helped to cultivate itself by virtue of that participation together. And that's kind of what I'm hearing that's part of this process. And there's an impossibly magical and dangerous complexity in this. And you're kind of giving a sense of just how, on the face of it, anyone could agree that this might be the most dangerous place to be in if you were to just look at the names and what the people involved had done and acts that they had committed. You'd be forgiven for thinking, wow, that seems like a very unsafe place to be. And yet it's also a place in which there are these profound stories of healing and the building of real community. And so in relating, and thank you for sharing the intensity you did, and I think it's appropriate to share, because there can be no passive, blocked, stuck, uninvolved relation to the energies of what it is to be part of this world together. We are impossibly, and so possibly, all involved together. And I like as well, and I appreciate as well, it's something that one of our facilitators and core part of the Voicecraft network in Australia always stresses, Cam Duffy always stresses the importance of returning to breath and how enabling that can be and how critical that is to a reconstituting of personhood and health and all these types of things. But I appreciate the intensity too, because that is so necessary to be with the energies of what we are. And we don't just have to imagine potentials anymore. I mean, you can just read through history, or you can pay attention to what's occurring in different parts of the world. You can pay attention to what might be occurring in the very house in which you live, certainly down the street. And so how we develop a maturity of really relating with the energies of what it is to be human.
If you are getting a whole lot of people together, I find it an extraordinary waste of human potential to have them all in rows looking into the back of someone's head, listening to one expert speaker from overseas. I went along to Melbourne University, that was to do with energy for transforming for a better world, and there's supposed to be this keynote speaker from America that was the leading person on new forms of social movements. And so I was conscious there was about 300 people in the room, all looking at the back of each other's heads. And he did this slide presentation where he had 45 minutes. He spent 43 minutes documenting what I call cataloguing disaster. And then he said, so new forms of social movement is what we need, thank you. And then I stood up and I said, you have taken, I didn't wait to be asked, and once I started talking, no one was going to stop me, because like I was on a flamethrower. You wasted 3/4 of an hour cataloguing disaster. Every single thing we spoke about, you spoke about, we already knew. We came here to hear from you what new things are happening in new social movements. Are you a plant by the dominant system to waste our bloody time? Yes or no? There's a binary question for you. Anyway, and I said, enough. I don't want to hear the question and answers here. I'm leaving. Right. And about 3/4 of the audience got up and left as well.
Yes, well...
Yeah, I would advocate the all coffee break conference. Everyone knows that all the key networking, the key learning of new insights is in the coffee breaks.
Right.
So you only have coffee breaks.
Yeah, no, well, I get that. I can certainly dream of, and more than dream, I think I can remember, and I feel it's very achievable to create the kind of context in which it's worth coming together to pay attention to a particular situation and then to return where there's a bit more
I love
agency.
The way you do it. You have enough of it, but you have us sitting in a beautiful choice of place. See, we haven't spoke about, you're creating what, in Aboriginal terms, could be called cultural locality. Cultural locality. Locality is connection to place, and particularly to sacred places, like this is a local sacred place here in this area. But cultural locality is people connected together, connected to place. People connected together, connected to place. That's cultural locality. And with voice, you're creating. The Underground Brunswick, a cultural locality.
Well, it's been awesome to have you join us, and I'm hoping that, and we've spoken about this before, but I'm hoping very much you'll join us again and we can engage in some community processes that draw us into, participation together, but also to learn with you and to welcome out your voice, because you deserve it.
Thank you. So he cutting you off. The book Nurturing Community for Wellness, I can give you the latest version and you can freely pass it on if anyone will ask for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can attach a link to that in wherever this is shared. Let me just take a moment to just reflect and just make sure that we're not missing something else that can be called into the space. How long have we been going here? This camera's finished, has it?
Yeah.
How long has it been finished?
3 minutes to 5.
Is my one still on?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
You started with strange attractors.
let's end with strange attractors. Well, it's interesting. There's some things there's a lot I would love to speak to on this in terms of how I'm relating with this in my own process. There probably isn't time for that, for those reflections from me.
Well, perhaps I could
Please.
say, if people are not familiar with the term, a simple sort of notion is the swinging pendulum. Goes back, but the midpoint down the bottom is an attractor. It'll end up stopping at that point. But if you spin it, it'll get smaller and smaller, so that if you had ink coming out of it, we'd end up with a spiral that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, if you, another phrase coming out of this language is the phase plane. Now, if you can imagine that you've got undulating surface and there's hollows in these round mountains, and you put a ping pong ball and you throw in there, it could run round and round and round and round. Then you give it a bit of a jolt and it pops out.
Right.
And it goes from one strange attractor to another.
Yeah.
So you can have multiple strange attractors. Now that I find is all metaphorical for the sorts of things we've talked about.
Right.
For example, when I was in Norway talking I had 24 nurses from Ghana were in the audience, and their strange attractor was their own bodies. They were very connected to their body in space. So I'd been talking about, and look, I had been particularly talking about shifting in the way these children move as the entry point for change. Because as soon as you get your centre of gravity high, all you need to do is move your body ahead of your foot. And you've got the free energy of gravity bringing you forward. Got the idea?
Yeah.
So as soon as you lower your centre of gravity, and particularly if you suppress your spine, your subjective sense of how heavy you are, you weigh a tonne. So I go down like that. Oh. Now, if I take my energy high and go down, I can go down to come up. So I go. But if I try to get up like that, bloody hell,
Right.
my knees are going to cave in. Right. So that is now
Leaning in.
leaning forward and down to get up. So you send your centre of gravity over your feet, and I had a woman who hadn't been able to get out of a chair for about 20 years. I said, would you like to be able to pop out whenever you want to? Yeah. I said, all right. I knew she could stand. Her feet could support the body, which was very large. I said that, okay, just go forward. So you're balanced, now stand up. What just happened? Now, these girls, they said, we have free energy. I'd introduced to Lukai to free energy. Can we dance for the last 5 minutes of your session? So all the dancing, body percussion. And they came downstairs with so much energy and verve and laughing and joking that the head of the conference blew a whistle. Quiet, everybody. This is an international conference. A bit of decorum, please. So the nurses had one of their most profound learnings about academia. They're not the least bit interested in a joyous, awesome spirituality of people that are alive and filled with spirit that they had at the end of our... And that their senior lecturer from Ghana that was with them, he came up to Lukai and me, said that is the most profound spiritual experience that I've ever had in my academic life.
Well, to academics who are interested in a joyous spirituality, you're more than welcome.
Yeah. They weren't.
I get that.
Because they were interested in what can we put in a book to teach so we keep our jobs. And you can't put dancing with enthusiasm in a book.
All right.
The lived life experience of it. And you said a key word before, essence. So some words jump out at me like a cherry in a fruitcake. Because essence comes from the Latin esse, which is spirit, or in some spiritualities, the God energy within, the esse, the essence. And it's in the word inter-esse, interest.
Right.
The original meaning was to tune into the God essence within you. And everything to do with it. And now it's become, it's not in your interest to be time conscious at the moment. It's not in your interest to be interested in that girl, says the mother in the 1700s. And now interest has been belittled to being the price of money. It's come a long way down.
Maybe that's somewhere we can pick up next time. It's been awesome to share this with you. Thank you, Les.
Thank you. How was that? Well, that moment, we tried out the boat. They said,
Yeah, well, let's pick